morning and welcome to the chat on Newsday Amarillo and News Channel 10-2. I'm David Lovejoy. Join me right now, Miss Amy Presley and Madison Fowler. They put together a podcast. One of the enduring tragedies and mysteries of our community is what happened to this young man right behind me, Mr. Dorien Thomas, disappeared and without a trace. And we really, when the incident happened, it was front page news, and it was the most important thing. A month later, the news cycle rotated, and we kind of went away from it. And there's still a lot of unanswered questions. Amy and Madison decided to dive into this issue and find out some of the things that have gone into this case in the time since his disappearance. Madison, Amy, thank you for joining me this morning. Amy, I'm going to start with you. What made you say, I want to know more about this, and particularly this case?
Well, I was just starting out I had just graduated high school in May of 98, and I had just started at AC in the fall of 98. And so I wasn't like watching the news that often. I was 18 years old, but it was everywhere. And I kept seeing the billboards, as I was driving to class. And I just remember it was the thing everybody was talking about. And I was like, how did this happen in our community? And I kept thinking he's just going to turn up and somebody's going to find him somewhere. And you're right. Like it kind of just stopped after some time. And then the years started ticking off, and 5 became 10, became 20, became now 25. And so about 7 years ago, I knew that I wanted to do a true crime podcast about stories from Amarillo, because we have a lot of interesting cases here. And I was like, I want to, and my original goal was to do a different episode for each case.
Right.
And with this case, I realized very quickly that that was not possible. There was so much more to this than just a kid going missing. And so I actually asked my friends about 5 or 6 years ago. I said, what are the cases that have stuck with you? What would you like to hear about? And Dorien by far was number one. So I knew this was what we had to do.
Madison, you came in on this project, and you were both young when this happened, when this tragedy happened in our community. What are some of the things that go into this case that maybe a lot of us who were around during that time and saw the big blow up of it, then it just kind of dissipated? What are some of the things that you would say we don't know?
Oh, man. Well, whenever Amy and I first started researching the case, she had mentioned that Dorien was one of the children who found Gloria's body behind the YMCA on the north side of Amarillo. And I had never heard that before. And a lot of the people that Amy talked to had also never heard that before. And I think that that is one of the biggest things that just is so unknown. Also, it's what happened to his bicycle.
Yeah.
Whenever Amber Hagerman went missing a couple of years before Dorien in Arlington, Texas, her bicycle was left behind. And so, Dorien, him on his bicycle was such a staple in North Amarillo. And so not knowing where his bicycle and not knowing where Dorien went is something that is just baffling, honestly.
Amy, what are some of the factors that we've heard this before, that if you want to be found, if you're missing, you need to be a slim white woman. That's honestly what they say, because if you're of color, they're like, yeah, they're just, it's an attraction factor because it's a media thing. What do you think are some of the contributing factors of why we don't know the details, or this case hasn't come to a better outcome?
Well, one of the things we discuss in the podcast is, there's a discrepancy on if there was a video from Toot and Totem. Dorien's brother Brandon says he's seen it, and he knew that he was buying corn, so he knew he was going fishing. APD said they just saw some still photographs. So there's actually not a video, and it's really grainy and you can't tell anything. So, I think part of the issue is that we as a community feel like a little left out. Like, I know it's an ongoing investigation, but if there's a 911 call, why haven't we heard it? Why aren't we seeing the video from Toot and Totem? You know, I feel like maybe there was something that some of us could have picked up on or helped out with, you know. So I think that's the contributing factor. The family obviously waited 24 hours. They say that they were told by dispatch to wait 24 hours to call. And dispatch, obviously, APD says that that's not true, that nobody would have ever said that. So there's a lot of back and forth of who said what. And after 25 years, it doesn't get any better. It actually gets harder because memories start to fade. People start adopting false memories, which we dealt with a lot when we were doing interviews. Things weren't lining up. Dates weren't lining up. Days of the week weren't lining up. So there's a lot of things that happen. And I think even in the moment, it was a little chaotic, you know, and it's just gotten worse over time.
Is there any hope or potential that this case gets opened back up and we find some answers we want?
Oh, I think so. I think it's already happening. We saw Brandon Thomas made a Facebook post just on Tuesday that there was a new lead in his brother's case. We have no information about what that is because it is an ongoing investigation. But that's what prompted us to actually release this sooner. So the first episode is out. We're not going to release the other episodes until the month of October. And our hope is to line up the episodes with Dorien's disappearance date, which is October 26th. But so I think that's already happening. I'm hearing that they're sending off DNA in Gloria and Linda's cases as well. So I think things are happening. And I just wonder if, because we inquired about it, maybe it kind of started happening again. I don't know. Or if it was just in the right moment.
Just for background real quickly, to explain to people when you talk about Gloria and Linda, what do you mean by that?
So Gloria Covington is the woman that Dorien found behind the YMCA. She was murdered in 1997. And then a few weeks later, Linda Jackson, she was also murdered in North Heights. So we were talking 2 murders that occurred in the months, in a year before Dorien went missing. Yeah. And then there was also a 3rd victim who was assaulted. And we talk about that in the case, or, you know, in the podcast as well. So there's a lot of moving parts to this that when we started, we thought we'll just do a nice 30-minute episode. Yeah. We'll talk about Dorien and that'll be it. And the more we dug, the more we found. And it just became, you know, I think we're probably going to do 4 episodes and then a 5th episode with us just talking about the case itself. So yeah, there's a lot more than just Dorien. And that's the other thing. We have at least 3 unsolved cases that happen within a year span.
And no resolution in any of those, all 3 of those?
No.
Where can they find?
And not, I'm sorry, not a lot of leads on any of them. So, yeah.
Where can they find this podcast at this first episode?
Sure. So we are on Spotify. We are on Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Google. I've got it dispersed to a lot of the other podcast like apps and podcatchers and things like that. So pretty much anywhere you can find or listen to your podcast. We're also on Patreon, which is where you can support us. So if you like the work that we're doing, you can hear early access to the episodes. So if you are interested, we'd love to have people join us there.